Welcome to Wellness Watch. Today's session of Wellness Watch comes from Season 1, which was originally recorded on Learn It Live, our live learning platform. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below and be sure to subscribe for more herbal medicine, wellness, and health-related content. I hope you enjoy today's session on mindful eating.
So welcome to Wellness Watch, everyone. This is a little bit of a special week. We're actually live from Central Park. We're doing some traveling, so you can get some healthy situations in other areas. So I pre-apologize if there's a little bit of wind going on. For those of you that don't know me yet, my name is Jillian Karnick. I am the Dancing Herbalist. I specialize in topical products for joint and muscle pain and skin healing. And I do also, again, run the Dancing Herbalist. And if you have any interest in consultation services with either myself or Annabelle, you can reach us through emailing the Dancing Herbalist. Annabelle, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks. Just holding down the fort over here while you're out and having a great time out there.
You want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Well, yeah, so I'm Annabelle. We do this so much, I don't even think about it. And I'm the author of the Conscious Canary blog, and I'm an avid raw food exploring vegan and a pharmaceutical injury survivor and a high-functioning autist. So I'm also a home practitioner of herbs and alternative methods of wellness.
So for those of you who are new to Wellness Watch, we have this session every week with Annabelle and myself or other herbalists or other practitioners that want to come and join us. And this month we started looking at breathing and meditation, and this week we're going to be looking at mindful eating. Next week we'll be looking at fasting, and all of these sessions are recorded, so if you found this session, you can find the others right through Learn It Live. We do have a variety of other classes on Learn It Live that you can find. Some are free, some are paid, but they look at herbal medicine, nutrition, wellness, plant identification, philosophy, a whole bunch of different things that you can find on here. Some of the other things that the Dancing Herbalist offers include our herbal products that you can purchase at thedancingherbalist.com. And we do also send out a newsletter once a month with health and wellness tips. And our blog is also a great place to go find new information about herbs and wellness. But if you do have any questions after these sessions, the best place to really go is to our Facebook group, which is the Dancing Herbalist Herbies. Now, we don't have a PowerPoint presentation this week because I am traveling, but you can find that link to that group right at thedancingherbalist.com. So as you explore on there, look at our products, check out some of our blogs, you can also join our Facebook group, the Dancing Herbalist Herbies. And again, we are going to be having our session next week on fasting. So I know that that's something, Annabelle, that you and I both talk about every so often, and it's something a lot of people do, but I think you and I both have a similar take, but a different view from the average person of what fasting is. Would you agree?
I agree, yes. I definitely have begun exploring more of the health benefits of fasting, so definitely a more alternative approach. I'm excited about talking about it because I'm just working into it myself. So I have a lot of exploring to do.
So this week we're talking about mindful eating. When do you think you first started doing mindful eating?
You know, I think I started a little bit a few years ago, but really I don't feel like I actually conscientiously focused on mindful eating until really the past year. What about you?
I started to realize it was a concept that I wanted to work with in my life maybe as many as 8 years ago. But it's definitely still something I practice every day because I come across so many different things, especially when I'm traveling like now, and being mindful of what I'm eating and just like paying attention and making a choice if I want to eat something or not. It's a constant practice. It's not something you can ever get perfect at, and plus our bodies are changing over time. Like for myself, I know I have a lot of food allergens, so I tend to avoid those foods. But lately, I've had times where I haven't avoided those foods, and I haven't had problems with them. So I can potentially make changes to the foods that I've been choosing to not eat now. So it's always just paying attention and seeing what changes. I think is a big part of mindful eating.
Yeah, and when I think about mindful eating also, I think not just about what I'm eating, because I also having a lot of allergen issues, have to really pay close attention to what I eat. Otherwise, I can end up in some dire situations. So the other part of mindful eating for me is the actual practice of consuming my food, meaning, chewing slowly, not being busy while I'm eating, not standing up and eating at a counter, to like really actually eat a meal, just focusing on eating the meal.
Yeah, I do. I enjoy being around you when you're eating food because you eat slowly and with intention. You really pay attention to like every bite you do. It always reminds me of the potato chip meditation. And I think a lot of people are scared to do potato chip meditation because, yes, you do only get to eat one potato chip. But I think really that's how a lot of people are first introduced to mindful eating because, again, you have to be intentional with the food you're eating, and the potato chip meditation really really encourages that. And I know this is not a practice that you would do, but with the potato chip meditation, you basically take one potato chip, and you basically take 5 minutes to eat the one potato chip. That's kind of the concept. You sit there, you have the potato chip in your hand, you look at it, you touch it, you feel its texture, you can smell it. Really smell it, smell the same on both sides. You can then take a second and break off a piece and listen to it and really be like, okay, this is how it sounds. And put a piece in your mouth and just sit with it there to let yourself taste it. To feel the texture in your mouth as you've already felt the texture with your hands. Do the same thing with your teeth. Feel the texture, listen to the sound, taste the new tastes that come out through the chewing process, and then swallow. And you've taken a small portion of your one potato chips. And you can keep eating small portions of it to kind of fully experience all the different sensations and really use all of your different senses.
Right.
And I think that it sounds weird because my impression of this has always been like I'm going to have a soggy chip in my mouth. It's going to be weird. But to some extent, that's good because you're really getting all of the different experiences of the chip, and you might not normally experience the chip in that way.
Right.
And for some people, this experiencing and really like looking at all of the different senses of the food they're eating, they may find that they don't enjoy it. I mean, this could be done with any kind of food. I mean, think of like with raspberries, for instance, because raspberries are beautiful in color and shape and sweet, and they have each little tiny little piece you could break off by itself. So like that, like you could do this kind of meditation with anything to just kind of really start having your body experience the food from a whole perspective rather than just my stomach needs food. There is now food in my stomach. I can move on.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's since we talked about meditation last week, definitely mindful eating to me is a form of meditation.
Yes.
But it's also what our digestive system needs in order to actually be able to properly digest and absorb, and utilize, and eliminate the nutrition that we're taking in.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is a win-win situation. And not only that, it does, help with anxiety levels. I find if I'm busy and I'm hurrying and I'm eating on the go, I'm just generally more anxious. So,
Yes.
and I do eat more. And so it's interesting that we're going to segue into fasting next week, because one thing that mindful eating has done for me is sort of prepped me to go into fasting, in a responsible way, but nonetheless, just because I don't have to eat as much, because I'm actually paying attention and I can say, oh, I'm full at this point, instead of I'm still rushing around or doing this or that and taking bites in between.
Yeah, no, definitely. When you are eating slower, it takes some time for food to get to your stomach before the signal gets to your brain that your stomach doesn't need more food in it. So when you're eating slower, you have that opportunity much sooner to realize that you don't need, or you don't have an interest in eating more food.
Right.
And I think you're right. It definitely can be really helpful with weight loss. And if you're really paying attention to your foods, so in your individual foods, I think that's really an empowerment method, so that you can choose which foods you're going to eat and not eat, especially if you are doing a traditional diet of some sort and limiting what foods you're eating. Because when you're conscious of the foods, you're going to choose the foods that you really want, not the foods that are just going to satisfy you briefly, and then you don't really want them longer.
Right. Right, absolutely. I mean, this has been part of, helping me get away from basically food addiction. I mean, really, there's no other way to put it. I mean, I lived a very fast food, unhealthy diet. So, it was funny when you were saying earlier about, you were like, oh, I know you wouldn't do the potato chips, but you know how hard it was for me. I mean, I really literally had a legitimate addiction to potato chips and corn chips and certain snacks. So mindful eating also has helped me deal with what has come up for me as I've stopped using food, as an emotional comfort. So, because it reveals to me, I'm quiet, I'm not rushing around. It kind of lets me know what I'm experiencing. And really, that's the whole thing with mindfulness is, actually being aware of what's going on around you. And it's not easy to do that in our very busy society.
I completely agree. It's really hard to be present and aware of everything in your surrounding and making changes as you need to. Like, for instance, I am in a very, well, not a very loud park, but a loud park right now. There's people doing stuff. And you can't always be aware of everything, because we filter out things that are not as important to us. So if you can hear them, you might be listening to me speak and be hearing the birds every so often, but over time you won't hear the birds in the background anymore, because you'll realize they're not important. So you'll drone them out. They won't show up. You won't notice them anymore. And the same thing happens with our food. We get so used to the same things, we don't pay attention to how our body feels in response to certain foods, because we just always have that feeling. It's not anything unique or different. Right. And as a result, we tend to think that it's normal. And I think this is a big thing with a lot of people that have food sensitivities, that they are not aware they have, because they've just gotten so used to their symptoms.
Absolutely. And when you're talking about people that have food reactions, for the ones that are aware of it, it can be very traumatizing to eat whenever you're experiencing life-threatening reactions. So this is another area that mindful eating has helped me when I'm doing an exposure, which for people that don't know what that is, that's when I'm trying to add something back into my diet. And sometimes I've had some really, some really catastrophic effects, but I've had to stay calm regardless of what's going on. I've had to call paramedics and stay calm. And so sometimes I would get so nervous about eating that I would almost have a reaction just because of the stress alone.
Yes, and our stress responses can really be intense. I know I have had times where I will be so nervous about an event that I won't be able to eat, or my stomach will be so upset. And I think a lot of younger people can experience this now with all the stresses of school, and I think some jobs also lead to that same kind of stress. And when you have that kind of stress, not only does it stimulate a big inflammatory response in your body, which is going to cause a whole host of issues, but that stress response also leads us to cravings.
Right.
So I think with cravings, when we're really stressed and we're craving something kind of like to calm ourselves, to comfort us for one reason or another, it tends to mean that we're not paying as much attention to what we're eating, and we're not giving it full thought as to if we actually want to eat it or not.
Right. And the other part that was kind of interesting when we were just talking earlier, it made me think about it, but when you're eating on the go in a rush or what have you, your cortisol levels are already high. And for people that have allergic reactions in regard to histamine, that can sort of like be the doorway to a reaction. So I think mindful eating can really be beneficial.
I know one of the things that I always remember when you are eating on the go, not only is having bitters a great option to kind of get your digestion started before you actually eat something, but like if you've gone to like a fast food restaurant or something, you can just sit in your car for 2 seconds, put your food on your dashboard, look at it, smell it, kind of do a quick version of the potato chip meditation, and just kind of like take it in and kind of like think about the food, think about how it's going to taste in your mouth, and get your body ready to eat. Because I think that is one way really mentally preparing our bodies to take in food can be really helpful for our digestive function, getting our bile flowing so we can break down fats more effectively, getting our hydrochloric acid production going so we can break down our proteins better. So getting all of these different things going so that if we are eating fast and on the go, at least our body is more prepared to digest it than just, oh, there's food, okay, we're done now.
Right.
And really just taking that time and thinking about it, because when you think about food, and I know you and I we kind of always tend to have a little snack nearby, especially when we're doing these wellness watches, because we talk about food a lot. We start to get hungry because we're talking about food. It's that mental component of eating and our cravings and things. It doesn't really matter what we're craving, but we're talking about food, so our mouths start to water. We start thinking about food, so we want to have food. And that our mouth watering and the saliva being produced is the beginning of the digestive process. So it really allows for our body to get started just thinking about food, to get ready to eat. Because if you're just
really
eating because you're supposed to eat, it's not benefiting you.
It really does. It's so interesting, how it all kind of interplays together because, the other part of that, what I really enjoy doing is I make a bitters tea that I steep overnight and I strain it in the morning. And 20 minutes or so before I'm going to eat, 20 or 30 minutes before I eat, I have a cup of bitters tea. a small cup, and that just kind of starts getting my, taste buds and everything activated, like, oh, we're going to have some food. But the thing that really has helped me is because I'm going into a very intensive fasting state along with a very restrictive state when it comes to food, I have had to really adjust my perspective. And so, that most of my diet is raw fruit.
Yep.
And so, I'm getting better at it, but it's a little difficult sometimes to get excited about, eating more fruit whenever someone sitting across from me is eating pizza and, something like that. And I don't want to bring that energy. So mindful eating for me, whenever I do the bitters tea, when it kind of wakes up my senses that I'm about to eat, by the time I sit down to have my meal, I'm extremely hungry, and I'm very excited and happy to be eating what I'm eating. So it actually, mindful eating helps me to enjoy my food, which has been a struggle as I've gone through, getting away from food addiction and treatment.
Yeah, I mean, lately I've been trying to expand my food options, not necessarily intentionally so, but just trying new things again, things that I had previously eaten and stopped eating, kind of to see if my body is still reacting to them or experiencing them in the same way.
Right.
And it's now been a time that I have my body is much cleaner than it used to be, and I know I can't eat all these foods all the time, but trying foods that I used to not be able to eat and seeing that, yes, every so often I can actually eat these without any significant consequence has been actually, it's been very stress relieving, because it's given me other options for food when I've been traveling.
Right.
And that's been really helpful for me. But I couldn't have started to do that unless I had really worked to heal the rest of my body, but also already been really clear and known exactly how my body has reacted to those foods.
Right.
And known how to take care of myself if I did have a reaction to one of them.
You made a point about, being on the go, because you definitely are, much more on the go than I am. So it's a challenge that you and I have talked about, especially some of the stuff you're going to be doing as far as, having to eat out. So, I guess it would be interesting to me, on a perspective of the autism issue, like when we went out to eat, it's very difficult to sit inside of a restaurant with people talking and things like that and try to enjoy a meal. And I would imagine that it's difficult just eating out to have that, real quiet, calm space to eat in. Do you have any tricks that you have that help you find a calm space?
You did make me think of one really, really important thing about mindful eating, especially when eating out, because I don't know who suggested it to me, but it is a practice I do, and I actually suggested it to someone just yesterday. Of if you are eating out and you have a menu in front of you, don't look at the menu. First, just stop for a second and listen to your body. Like, what does your body actually want?
Right.
If you have a craving, for instance, like what is beneath that craving? Like if you are craving something sweet, you may really be wanting something rich in minerals.
Right.
If you're craving something fatty, you may want something that is really just higher in protein. Or if you want something high in protein, and there's other options. Like you can adjust accordingly, like listen to your body and actually think about it. And then once you have that, you get to make the choice of what kinds of foods do you then look at in the menu. So if I mean, like right now, so Annabelle, why don't we both do this? Like, think about your body. And I know you always want to eat bananas, but is there something, like, if you just kind of sit for a second and think about what your body is actually looking for right now.
Actually, it's interesting. One thing I've noticed is that when I'm really feeling excessively thirsty, you know, like dehydrated type almost feeling, that I crave watermelon. And so as soon as I drink a nice big, like usually I do 32 ounces, you know, I just cut up a ton of watermelon and blend it and drink it down. That just works pretty much immediately. So I definitely
have of the electrolytes, because if you're really dehydrated, electrolytes can be really important in getting the water actually absorbed into your body.
Right. Yeah, so it's, you know, I like that suggestion because, you know, I was always the opposite. I would look at the menu and decide what looked good and then, you know, pick something to eat. Instead of thinking, you know, what is my body needing? But that's really the whole aspect of mindful eating is, you know, I mean, before I really was just a slave to my taste buds. So this brings, you know, the mind-body connection, like, oh, you know, food is my medicine, and I'm actually eating for fuel and, you know, to have healthy cells, not just to eat something that I like, you know?
Or eating something because it's going to be medicine for you in one way or another.
Right. I don't know if you can hear the train.
We're talking about food too much. I needed to eat something. So I'm munching now. I needed something myself. But in our practice, I was thinking of sitting here. I was like, I feel like my body needs a little bit of protein right now. So I happen to have these protein energy bite things here, so I could have a few of those. But if you're really, like, it's not always about hunger either, because mindful eating, like, we eat for other reasons too. We eat for joy, for sadness. I mean, we eat for emotional reasons as well as just the fact that we're hungry, or just because it's social and it's what we're doing. And
I think I think that's an important point, because it's not necessarily a bad thing to eat, you know, with emotion. It's just not good to eat to suppress emotion, which was always what I did.
That is definitely something we tend to do.
Yeah, that was definitely a big go-to.
For myself, I think a lot of people are like this. When I've eaten a lot of dairy, I have a little bit of a brain fog, I'd like to say. Like, I'm not quite thinking as fast as I want. I'm a little inflamed, and my brain's not working quite as well as I'd like it to when I've been having a lot of dairy. So if I have some emotional stuff I don't want to deal with, I'm not necessarily thinking about eating dairy to, like, put up that emotional, like, that fog barrier in my brain. But dairy is one of those foods that I crave when I'm more emotional, more stressed. And it does that. It puts that fog barrier up. And sometimes that's what you need to work through it slower. It's kind of slow down the emotional experience. But it shouldn't be a time to kind of block your emotional experience and be worried about it and not process it. I mean, processing things take time. But as long as you're trying to find additional solutions, I think it can be a tool to use intentionally or not intentionally.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I actually didn't really think about that because my reactions to dairy are extreme, and they give me brain fog on a hyper level. So I become almost like I have dementia. Like I literally just, disconnect and go fully into a fog. And, I was thinking a little while ago about some of the really horribly hard habits that I've had to break that I really struggled with. I had a definite issue with substance abuse and smoking cigarettes and, drinking. And it's interesting, though, because what I've learned about these as I've, been recovering, and I talk with a lot of other people that have the same struggles, it's interesting how we, on some strange biological level, know how to self-medicate ourselves. And I think that is a lot of the impulse, issue whenever it comes to any type of addiction.
And cravings in general as well.
Yeah. I mean, you think
Cravings
about
are
an animal in the
definitely kind of
wild.
self-medication.
Right. I mean, cigarettes are like that. Drinking alcohol is like that. It's definitely a form of self-medication. And when you see an animal in the wild that's sick and goes and eats grass or something like that, I mean, we just somehow begin to crave what we need. And that's why you made the point about understanding your cravings. I think that's crucial because people will crave something salty, and it's not that you really want salt, or that you want something sweet. Right. It's not that you need to go get an ice cream cone. There really is a basis to that. But so those are some really good points. I didn't really think about that because I used to, when I would get, upset or, have a very difficult time emotionally. In fact, I used to leave my therapist's office and go down to the corner and get a soft serve, caramel soft serve. Like it was just pretty much standard.
Yes, your reward for working on your emotions is to then eat food that is going to disrupt your emotions.
Right, exactly. Just such a vicious cycle. So that's a really good point. I never really actually feel like I fully made that connection. I knew that I used food to suppress emotions and to deal with anxiety. A lot of times it was just a comfort for me because it was something I was familiar with. So that's very interesting. And now we're talking about mindful eating again. I just noticed I'm getting a rumble in my belly.
No, I agree. Whenever we talk about food, I get a little bit hungry too. But I think paying attention to your cravings and really understanding what your personal cravings mean. I know a few times, especially when we were talking about our something sweet class, we were talking about fruit and how we both had this kind of like impression that we shouldn't be eating a lot of fruit, so we ate all these refined sugars instead. And really breaking that habit and be like, no, craving something sweet means I need fruit, like real fruit.
Right.
And, But on the other end, a lot of people crave sweet things when they're missing something sweet in their life more an emotional way, like when they need a hug or to feel loved. That sweet craving can also be associated with that as well. So making sure that you are in community with people and you have people to talk to can also be really helpful for all different kinds of cravings. So you have someone to talk to about it and just bounce ideas off of about how you can support yourself.
Yeah, understanding cravings, I think, is so important. There's so many factors there. You have your gut biome, you could have parasite issues, and you have neurotransmitter issues. So for people that, and I definitely was in this, category for a long time, when people consume especially high amounts of refined sugar, there is something that happens with the neurotransmitters. When you eat empty calories and you eat things that are toxic to the body, it confuses the neurotransmitters that reside inside of the belly. And so these cravings can get all over the place. And one thing I had a big issue with cravings was I really struggled with rapidly changing blood sugar. And so I wouldn't even necessarily be hungry, but it was almost like my body was hungry because my blood sugar would just plummet so quickly. And it used to be almost a joke, like if I said I was hungry, within 10 minutes I needed to eat something because I could get so unstable so quickly. So, really paying attention and being mindful to what's going on with your body in more ways than just eating is a wonderful guide to what is going on. These were red flags to me that something was wrong, and it took me a long time to understand that these were warning signs. So, and then, I just had a horrible time with weight management, which made mindful eating even more difficult for me. Trying to see. Oh, let's see. Oh, are we still there?
I'm still here, Annabelle. Sorry.
Okay. No, I just was making sure. Sometimes my phone, does a weird thing. But
Yeah.
But I think, understanding the issue with cravings is beyond important. And then I like using mindful eating sometimes to challenge myself as I'm going into more of a fasting state and as I've been altering my diet, so as people call radically, I've had to really set some big challenges for myself. And so I've been able to use mindful eating as a tool in that. Have you done anything like that?
I don't think I understand what you're referring to.
Well, I use mindful eating to help challenge myself to have not just eating good and healthy foods, but times of the day I eat, because I used to just kind of like get hungry and eat any time of the day or what have you. So I've had to do some mindful eating techniques to kind of get me on a regular pattern of eating versus just, eating anytime I'm hungry.
No, yes, that is definitely something I am not practiced at. That is definitely something that I could focus on more in my own schedule because I generally do eat when I feel hungry and or when I'm bored, and which is definitely not the time to eat for the most part. Um, but I have a tendency to forget to eat. And it's not necessarily that I'm not paying attention to my schedule or that I'm not paying attention and listening to my body. I just don't have very good hunger cues.
Right.
And I think this is the case for a lot of individuals because it's one of those things. Oh, yes, another thing, just sidetracking briefly, is the concept of feeling hungry is really not always a hunger for food, but sometimes is for water or because we're dehydrated.
Right.
And a lot of us have a hard time distinguishing between those two sensations. And I think this is a big reason why so many people are chronically dehydrated. and they're just not really aware that they're dehydrated. But when it comes to my own hunger cravings, I know that I don't have a good cycle when it comes to when I am eating or when I'm not eating, or at least they don't fit the standard norms. I mean, I tend to, even if I'm waking up at 7 or 8, I feel most comfortable eating my first meal around 11 o'clock in the morning, and maybe having another meal around 3 or 4, and then eating again around 8 or 9. Now, my sleep schedule is very different than the average person because I don't tend to go to sleep until at least midnight. But if you look at it that way, then maybe my food schedule does make sense in the time frame when I'm awake. But I will often forget to eat, and this is what causes my second meal of the day to be later and later.
Right.
And I personally believe a lot of this is because the organ system that I still work on frequently to support is my liver and gallbladder system, which is really what's going to stimulate that hunger response when the bile is continuing to flow and like processing the food in the intestines, and then all of a sudden there's no food there. So there's that little bit of irritation from the bile in the intestines saying, oh, now it's time to eat. And that's something that I just don't have a good experience with recognizing in my body. So I tend to forget to eat, and then I have to actually remind myself. And again, one of the biggest things to support this is taking bitters. And I mean, bitter herbs, there's just so many different options out there. Just go to a grocery store and look in the health food section for something that says bitters on it and follow the instructions. And it's not hard to take bitters, but they can be really helpful in stimulating your digestive secretions, not only your bile production, but also hydrochloric acid production in a variety of, like your pancreatic fluids, for instance. And that can be really helpful in preparing you to digest food. And when you use bitters more frequently, usually you take them about 15 minutes before a meal every time you're going to eat. Your body is going to get more used to that, kicking off that digestive process, just like that paying attention, actually thinking about the food you're going to eat before you eat it. So your body gets used to having food at the same time, and that can really encourage a more effective quality of eating. And when you do take the time and put the intention in to make sure you have food, then you're less likely to have cravings, because if you know what you normally are going to want to eat, then you're not going to have those same kinds of cravings as frequently. And I think for most people that means eating fruit and actually putting good quality salt on your food. I feel like it's funny, Annabelle, you and I had dinner last week, and we were tasting it, and we're like, is this salty enough? And I'm like, now, Annabelle, I know it's salty enough, but I know you and we are both going to add more salt to this when it's in our own plates. So I was like, you should just add more salt now. And just because we know what we need, because we have paid attention to our salt intake pretty well, and finding how much salt you need, I think, is a really important thing for most people. And I think I don't think I've been craving salty things nearly as much now that I've been really focusing on adding salt to my food, because that was one of the first things that I thought was healthy, was to not put salt in food. So I cut that all out, and it was not a healthy decision for me now that I look back. But that was a long time ago, and I've been able to bring salt back in, and I don't have that same worry anymore about not having salt. And the same thing with fruit. I can eat fruit now comfortably without feeling like I shouldn't have too much fruit because it's too expensive or it's too much sugar, because I know it's better than other sugar options. And I know I need sugar.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like it's as I take things out of my diet, mindful eating has helped me. And I think specifically the biggest area is it's helped me not to snack the way I used to. So when I do eat meals, I put everything that I need into it, because I'm not getting that somewhere else, which I used to. snacking was the big thing for me. So, but yeah, it's interesting because once I stopped eating processed foods, I really had to do a lot of mindful eating, not just because of cravings, but also because things were tasting different. My palate was changing.
Yes.
I, didn't have salt and things in my diet anymore by eating, something out of a bag or that had already been prepared. So my body, it was just kind of like, wow, what's going on here? I had to really pay attention.
No, I definitely agree. And I think it's important to know, and I know you and I have mentioned having a class on salt, but there are lots of different kinds of salts out there. And it's really important. I mean, we're talking a lot about sugar and salt. We're talking a lot about sugar and salt because that's what a lot of people crave the most and aren't necessarily mindful when they're eating them. But there are some different salts that have different kinds of minerals in them, so you may not always need or want the same kind of salt.
Right.
And so I think that's a really important small factor to keep in mind. I know you primarily use pink Himalayan salt, correct?
Correct. And a very specific brand.
Yep. Now, I also primarily use that, and I will use Celtic sea salt as well. But I have to also actually use what I label as bad quality salt, the Morton salt, because I am considered to be allergic to seaweed, and I don't really have any natural iodine sources in my diet. So I do need to have that less quality salt because of the iodine content in it every so often. So I actually get some iodine in my body because that is something that's necessary for a lot of our functions. So it's important to remember that. And I remember a few months ago when I was at the American College of Sports Medicine Symposium that one of the nutritionists who was speaking, mind you, she works primarily with professional athletes. So not necessarily everybody should hear what she's saying, but she was really saying to actually have iodized salt. And at some point in time, all salts that went into all processed foods stopped having iodine in it. So because we need iodine, so it was added to the salt that we were using, but so many of us are not using standard table salt with iodine in it now. So many people are not getting enough iodine. And it is not the salt that's used in processed food anymore. It does not require to have iodine in it. So many of us who are considering more health conscious are not getting the iodine because it's not in the Celtic sea salt. It's not in the pink Himalayan salt. So having another source of iodine is really important, and the seaweed is the way to go for that with sea vegetables.
Yeah.
And I suggest seaweed a surprisingly amount of time, considering the fact that I can't really eat it myself. But and seaweed is salty, so a lot of people like it. And
it's very interesting because again, it comes to that, we know what we need, and I had the same issue with iodine, so sea veggies and things like that. I started having less cravings, which were really related to dehydration. Whenever I started doing things like adding sea veggies, or adding those really nutritive herbs into my water, or infusing my water with fruit, I started having less and less cravings because before, like you were saying, I wasn't actually hungry. My body needed minerals. It needed hydration, which is another reason I like turning to those real
Oh, did I lose you, Annabelle? Annabelle, are you there? Well, while we wait a second to see if Annabelle's coming back or if I have the problem with my reception today, as seems to be our new game every week.
Okay, there we go.
Oh, welcome back, Annabelle.
Hey, I don't know what happened. It just, did its thing. So, but I was just saying, yeah, nutritive herbs, things like that that increase electrolytes really help cut down on craving.
Yeah. And so, well, we talked a lot about kind of like our own experiences with mindful eating. I think, where do you think people should start with mindful eating? I mean, I mentioned the potato chip meditation as an option to start. I also think like food journaling can really be helpful, especially if you're not used to paying attention to your body. Are there any particular things that you think people should start with?
I have a saying, and it's not from me, it's from an author that I enjoy, but he says, "What's at the end of your fork?" And that's kind of a place that I started. I was just like, what is at the end of my fork? Like what am I eating? For me, that was another big place. Food journaling and all that, came into play for me too. But really, I think that was kind of the beginning aspect where I would just be like, well, where did these vegetables come from? And, what is this meat? What is this whatever, I was eating at the time. So that was a big place for me.
There's so many different things we can do when we start being aware of our bodies, and there's so many different things we can learn from ourselves. And they're not always going to be positive things.
Right.
And I think it's easy to hope everything's going to be a good thing that we learn about ourselves. But it's not, it isn't always. And sometimes the things can hurt and be painful when we don't get the right nutrients or we eat something that's not great for us.
Right. Or when we stop eating stuff that's not good for us, because that, like I said, was a big part of the process for me and still is in many ways. Whenever I get past something that was habitual that I did before, in order to move past it, it has to expose itself. So any type of emotion that I had tucked underneath food, revealed itself, and sometimes, just not eating stuff that's not good for me is difficult because I have to learn to manage emotions in a different method.
I have a friend that's come to say hi. I have a few little birds that have come over to see me. And they're all getting their lunch now, too. So
That's right. You have an audience there on location.
So, really, how do you feel that mindful eating leads us into considering doing fasting practices? That's what we'll be discussing next week.
Fasting? Yeah. Oh, geez. I think it's, I don't know if you can do fasting without mindful eating. I guess you could super will it, you could power through it. But I think if you have to have that aspect in play, because fasting in and of itself, from what I've experienced thus far, and I'm very new into this world of fasting, it is a very, very intensive process. And just like we were talking about suppressing emotions, there's a lot of that, and there's also a lot of trying to regulate the body's functions. So I think that mindful eating is imperative for fasting. What about you?
I agree, and I think it's important that we mention that when you and I are talking about fasting, we're not talking about like going for a week without eating food. We're really talking about like eating a selective number of foods so your body has the opportunity to rest and only process a few different foods so that it can recharge and strengthen itself in the process. Rather than removing things, we're allowing the body to rest and recharge and heal itself through fasting. And I think if you're really going to be doing this, to be doing that kind of thing to really help your body recover from something you've been experiencing, you have to be aware of your body. You have to know how to listen to your body, and you have to know how to, when you are eating something, you have to really be able to get the most out of those calories, both mentally and physically. And because
Right.
the mental portion is also the taste and enjoyment and satisfaction of the food that we're eating, because that's the hard part when it comes to fasting, is that you don't get those kinds of satisfactive feelings. So unless you're really fully enjoying the food that you're eating, fasting is significantly harder.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting journey through the fasting type period.
Yep.
But I look forward to it, and the discussion that we had last week is also, I think, an imperative part, meditation,
Yes.
I don't know how I can get through fasting without meditation. Not a long-term fast, anyway.
Yeah, and I really think meditation itself is important to, we talk about cravings a lot, and like meditation can really help to calm those too. You do need to listen to your cravings. That's, I think, the most important part, because cravings have a reason, but you don't need to have your cravings control you.
Right.
And meditation can really be helpful in releasing that dependence on your own cravings.
Right. Absolutely. Especially, at least for me personally, because I've had to go through treating parasite issues and things like that, it can become very uncomfortable physically, going through that. So mindful eating, meditation, all of those things are, they interplay with each other in my experience.
Yep. Well, Annabelle, before we say goodbye today, do you have any final thoughts on mindful eating?
No, I think we've gone over the gamut. I'm going to mindfully eat a mango.
Ooh, mango sounds lovely right now.
Mm.
I would love to have some mango juice right now. It would be very refreshing.
Mm.
But I'll have to take a few minutes when our session ends to think about what I'll be having for lunch today, so that I fully can actually get what my body needs.
Right.
Because right now I think I mostly need sleep. But food is also important as well.
Right. Well, that sounds
Annabelle,
good. I'll just be looking forward to next week.
Yes, me as well. It's been a great session this week. And if anybody does have any questions, remember to come over to our Learn It Live page. You can message on Learn It Live, but also to our Facebook group, the Dancing Herbalist Herbies. And we do have these sessions every week. They are free through Learn It Live, so you can be sure to come back and check our schedule on Learn It Live. We do try to send out reminders when we can about upcoming sessions. And if you do want to keep seeing our wellness watches like this today, be sure to join us on Patreon to help support the Dancing Herbalist in its free services, such as this session or these weekly sessions. And if you do have any suggestions or topics you want to hear us discuss, please be sure to send us an email. And we look forward to hearing from all of you. I hope you all have a great week.
All right, thanks. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.
All right. So are you sure you want to pause the recording? You can resume record again button.
Just press OK.